One of the features of the early Olympic Games was that it served amateur athletes. Pierre de Coubertin was very convinced that the Olympics should be not a professional event, but an expression of amateur sports in their purest form. So for many years, the Olympics refused to allow any professionals to participate in the Games. Now, at the time, there were not that many professional athletes, so it was not a big issue. But as professional sports became more important and more people found that they could work as an athlete as their career and employment, then it increasingly produced tensions within the Olympic movement, because the professionals naturally wanted to express their skill and talent in the Olympic Games, but were forbidden from doing so because of the rules. The rules increasingly put a tension between athletes and the Olympic movement. One of the results of this was that there were frequent protests by countries over whether or not their athletes could attend. For example, in the post-World War II Olympics, Austria and Switzerland withdrew from alpine skiing because the Olympic movement refused to allow ski instructors to participate. So essentially the best athletes were not able to participate because of the rule on amateur versus professional status. Another example was in the 70s, when Canada refused to send a hockey team to the Olympics because most of its players would have been banned under the amateur-only rules. The IOC found that it was losing money because the Olympics were not attracting the best. It was not able to obtain the highest broadcast revenue because the event was not attracting the audience it might. And a further complication was that a number of countries were employing their athletes in the military and giving them time and resources to perfect their sport. So over time, the strain on the Olympics became harder and harder to sustain. And by the time we get into the 1980s, professionals were allowed finally to participate in the Olympic Games. Athletes could have been disqualified from Olympic competition from what we would consider today to be quite minor infractions, and that is wearing logos, being seen with manufacturers' equipment, and displaying or associating themselves with that equipment. Today we think nothing of seeing athletes representing their sponsors, endorsing equipment, but in the past it was impossible to do so. And early competition in the Olympics meant that any logos or brands were covered up so they could not be seen. One of the interesting quirks you'll observe in the Olympics is when athletes in sports like skiing are interviewed at the end of their race, often they'll hold up their skis so that the logo of the manufacturer is next to their face to guarantee the association of the brand with the athlete's success. The Olympic movement has come a long way in recognizing professionals, and one of the vice presidents of the IOC, Kevin Gosper, just recently stated that sport has moved from being an optional amateur opportunity to a form of work, a profession. It's more serious, more important, and better for all parties. Earlier in this MOOC, we mentioned the infamous 1948 ice hockey teams sent by the United States. And it's time to tell this story, which is quite detailed. So in 1948, with the St. Moritz Olympics, the United States ends up with two hockey teams that each claimed the right to represent the United States. The American Athletic Union was an amateur league that was endorsed by the United States Olympic Committee, which is an NOC, a National Olympic Committee. There was also the Amateur Hockey Association, which allowed professionals to participate. And the Amateur Hockey Association was recognized as the US team by the International Federation of Ice Hockey. So we have two groups equally empowered by the Olympics to represent either a country or a sport, each backing a different team from the United States. Both teams went to St. Moritz. The IOC ruled that neither team could compete. But when that was announced, the Swiss Olympic Committee, as the host, said that if the IOC banned the teams from participating, they would not allow the Games to proceed. the US Olympic Committee threatened to withdraw all US athletes. If this was the case, the city of St. Moritz responded that if the USOC withdrew athletes, St. Moritz would not hold the games. At the opening ceremony, the American Athletic Union marched as the official US team, while the Amateur Hockey Association was forced to sit in the stands. But when it came time to play, it was the Amateur Hockey Association that was in fact given the right to play. The Amateur Hockey Association, though, found that members of the American Athletic Union were actually cheering for the opposing teams. So we have one team of American hockey players supporting the opponents of the official US team at the games. The end result was that the US, highly distracted, came fourth in the event, but it was classified as a disqualification officially in the records. One of the essential elements of the Olympics is, of course, that athletes represent a country and their identity with that country, their home country. But athletes may well have more than one nationality. They could be dual or multiple citizens, and therefore may have some choices in which country they represent. We also have cases where athletes have moved to another country and sought and received citizenship that allowed them to compete for another country from their homeland. Athletes sometimes compete under the Olympic flag, and this will be happening this year because the Indian National Olympic Committee was not recognized by the IOC because of irregularities in its structure and organization. So Indian winter athletes will be competing, but they will be competing and marching under the Olympic flag. And the results will in fact show an individual win rather than a win for an athlete and a country. One of the interesting elements of sports today is how complex the nationalities are for players. And frequently, sports such as ice hockey in North America, you will find that there are many different nationalities playing on the same team. This means that the teammates will in fact be at the Winter Olympics, but playing on different sides, even though they are part of one team in the United States or Canada. In order to participate, athletes have to follow a number of rules and guidelines that are quite extensive. They need to follow the spirit and rules of the Olympic Charter and to follow the IOC's Athlete's Handbook, which we have referred you to in our reference section. They need to follow the rules of the sport as laid down by the International Federation. So any changes in equipment, style, performance that emerges has to be endorsed by the International Federation, and athletes must follow those rules when it comes to Olympic play. The National Olympic Committee in each country chooses athletes and supports them as they represent their home country. One of the main features of a Winter Olympics is the popularity of ice hockey. And one thing that is emerging currently is the importance of the National Hockey League in international hockey. The National Hockey League, which is in the United States and Canada, is sending more than 150 athletes to the Winter Olympics, and they will be playing for 12 different countries. So any game you see of ice hockey at this Olympics, both sides of every game will in fact have NHL members. The concern, however, on the part of the NHL is that this disrupts their regular season. They must close down every 4 years for a 2-week hiatus and send athletes to the Winter Olympics. The athletes naturally desire to represent their country and also to achieve the opportunity of an Olympic medal. The NHL, on the other hand, does not want to disrupt its normal sequence of gameplay for the 4-year Winter Olympics. The NHL, in fact, did not allow professional hockey players to participate until 1998, even though they were allowed to compete as early as 1988. The NHL is on record now as raising concerns about whether or not NHL players will be released for future Olympics. And given the immensity of the participation by NHL players in Olympic hockey, a decision by the NHL for the North American market could in fact impact global hockey and how it is played if the players are not able to participate in Olympics going forward.
While you're watching the Olympics, it is often interesting to consider how female athletes are portrayed in the media. Women are often portrayed as, athletes are portrayed as the girl next door, competing for their parents' goals. And one of the examples you can see of that is in the Procter & Gamble Thank You Mom, Pick Them Back Up video. 3 of the 4 athletes are female. And it makes this connection between that women are very connected to their mothers and have their mother's support in their competition. Media will often focus on beauty or grace of women rather than on their strength or determination when describing their performance. Media will also often explain the failures of female athletes as being a lack of mental toughness, a lack of mental focus, or of being too emotional. And when you think about all the close-ups of female figure skaters crying and their mascara running, that's something the media really likes to focus on. In part, the media does this because they need melodrama to bring in viewers. So witness in 1994, the soap on ice of Tonya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan, which brought in lots of viewers, and the drama of their unfolding relationship as played out both on and off the ice really captured viewers' attention. And that's been revisited just recently by ESPN in their 30 for 30 program called The Price of Gold. So while you're watching the Olympics, just think about what are the words that the announcers are using to describe women. Are they talking about how beautiful they are, or graceful they are, or are they trying to say that they're the girl next door? Or are they using the same language to describe female athletes as they are men? Now, you might also argue, though, that things are getting better for women in 2014. There are new events for women, most notably ski jumping, which has been a male-dominated, male-only Winter Olympic sport since the beginning of Winter Olympics. But finally this year, they have ski jumping for women. Both the ski half-pipe and ski slopestyle and the snowboard slopestyle and snowboard parallel slalom all have events for women, as they do for men. There are also new events where men and women are competing together. So there's a biathlon mixed relay, there's a luge team relay, which involves both the female lugers and the men lugers, and there's a new figure skating team event, which will involve both men and women. The Sochi Olympics may, in fact, mark a new era for the description of women in sports.